I am Isabel Moreau, 57 years old, once a stage mask designer who spent decades painting faces that weren't my own. It began with one casual question. So ordinary, it should have led to laughter, to plans, to champagne flutes raised together. I held the phone to my ear and asked my son, "So, when is the wedding?" There was a pause, just long enough for my heart to tighten. Then came his voice, lighter than air, almost careless. "Mom, we got married yesterday." For a second, the world stopped. The phone slipped in my hand, its weight suddenly unbearable, like a block of lead dragging my arm down. My breath caught in my throat. I thought I had misheard him, that the line had cracked, but the silence on the other end was not static. It was final. A hollow ringing filled my ears, louder than his words, louder than the city outside my apartment window. My knees buckled, and I lowered myself onto the nearest chair before I collapsed. Yesterday. My only son had married yesterday, and I had not been there. I forced the words out, hoarse, trembling. "What do you mean, yesterday?" He exhaled, a short laugh, as if the confession were nothing more than a forgotten errand. It was small, just a few people. We didn't want to make a fuss. No fuss, not even his mother. My fingers, still clutching the phone, grew numb. The edges of the device dug into my palm, but I couldn't release it. When the call ended, I stared at the black screen until it blurred into my reflection, an aging woman with hollow eyes. My hands, trained to sculpt delicate plaster masks for opera stages, trembled so hard I feared they might break themselves. I turned to my computer, desperate for proof, desperate for a lie. I opened the social media page I avoided most days, and there it was, a single photograph. She wore white, radiant, in a gown that shimmered under the Lisbon sun. He stood beside her, tuxedo crisp, his arm wrapped around her waist. They both smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't seen on him since he was a child. And in the middle of that happiness, my absence screamed louder than any presence could. I wasn't there. I wasn't even mentioned. No empty chair left for me. No hand searching the crowd for mine. I pressed the screen closer, as if proximity could change the picture, insert me where I belonged. My chest ached with each shallow breath, the ache spreading like cracks through glass. I whispered aloud, my own voice foreign to me. Why? Why would my son hide his wedding from me? The question hung in the air, unanswered, echoing against the walls of the apartment I had sacrificed decades to pay for. Why did the child I raised in hunger and rain, the boy who once clung to me, whispering, "You're my hero, Mama," choose to erase me from the most important day of his life? And as the photograph burned into my mind, I realized this was no mistake, no oversight. It was deliberate. That single image proved the truth I had feared but never dared to name. The son I had built my life around wanted a future that did not include me. The white mask still sits on the corner of my work table. Its plaster surface has dulled with age, the edges chipped from years of careless handling by students. Yet every time I brush the dust away, I see myself in it, blank, expressionless, hiding all that should have been revealed. I keep it in my studio, not because it is beautiful, but because it remembers. And when I stare at it long enough, it pulls me back through time. I began designing masks at 21 in a cramped Paris workshop that smelled of glue and wet plaster. At first, it was survival, nothing more. 10 euros here, 20 there, painting carnival masks for tourists. But slowly, theaters noticed me, small productions, then larger ones. I never earned much, but enough to feed my son, enough to keep us warm. When he was accepted into university abroad in Lisbon, the tuition was a mountain I had no strength to climb. 28,000 euros a year. I still remember typing the first transfer. 28,000.euro. My finger hovered over the enter key as if pressing it might collapse me. I typed my 6-digit password, my hand trembling so hard I had to start again. 3 times, I erased and retyped until finally the screen confirmed. The transaction complete. I exhaled as if I had just finished a marathon, though all I had done was give away everything I had saved that year. Money left faster than it came. I worked nights teaching mask painting workshops in community centers. I sold my own designs at festivals, watching children run with them into the crowd, never to return. Every mask was a fragment of my rent, of my son's textbooks, of his chance at a life better than mine. When he called, his voice was always bright. Mom, I need another payment for housing. Mom, the materials are expensive here. And always, I answered, of course, darling. I'll send it tomorrow. Tomorrow meant I skipped lunch. Tomorrow meant I stitched together an old coat instead of buying a new one. Tomorrow meant I sold my gold earrings, a gift from my late husband, to a pawnbroker who didn't even look at my face. Each euro was a thread pulled from my skin, but I told myself it was worth it. The mask on my table was once white as snow. I used it to teach my students about neutrality, how a blank face could become anyone, anything. But in truth, it was a portrait of me, because I, too, learned to stay neutral, to smile when my bank account emptied, to nod when my body ached from 12-hour days, to say I'm fine when exhaustion gnawed at my bones. I hid behind that mask and I wore it so long that even I began to forget the real lines of my own face. One memory clings to me. Winter 15 years ago. Snow piled outside the apartment window, cold seeping through the cracked walls. My son was tan, feverish. I had no money for the heating bill. I sat by his bed, wrapping him in every blanket I owned, pressing my own body against his to share warmth. He whispered through chattering teeth, "You're my hero, Mama." Those words burned into me brighter than the frost that night. They became my fuel, my justification for every sacrifice after. If he thought me a hero, then surely I was doing the right thing. But heroes, I would later learn, are often forgotten once the battle is won. Years blurred into transfers and receipts. I sent money for rent, food, books, sometimes even for weekend trips he needed to join his classmates. I told myself it was normal. Every student deserved joy, not just survival. Still, there were moments, small but sharp, that pierced my certainty. Like the time I visited Lisbon and asked him where he wanted to have dinner. He glanced at his girlfriend before replying, "Somewhere cheap, Mom, so you won't worry." The words stung not for their meaning, but for the quick flicker in his eyes, as if I were an embarrassment. Or the time I found a receipt in his pocket for a designer watch, 2 months of my wages. When I asked, he smiled and said, "It's an investment. Don't worry about it." I laughed then, pretended to agree, but inside, my stomach turned. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Little hints, like shadows before a storm. But I was too busy working, too desperate to keep him afloat, to admit what those shadows meant. Sometimes, late at night, as I closed the workshop alone, I would glance at the white mask on the shelf. Its blank eyes stared at me, unblinking, unforgiving, and I would whisper to it as if it could answer, "Am I doing the right thing? Or am I just making him forget who I am?" The mask, of course, said nothing. Silence was its only truth. If I had been wiser, I might have noticed that my sacrifices were not invisible. They were simply taken for granted. I told myself that was what mothers did. They gave and gave and gave until their children stood tall. But perhaps, without meaning to, I taught him a different lesson, that I would always cover the bill, always bend, always remain in the shadows. And perhaps he learned too well. Now, in the present, as I trace the cracks on that old white mask, I wonder, did I raise a son who loved me? Or did I craft a son who only loved what I could provide? Either way, the mask is still here, chipped but whole. And I feel more broken than the plaster ever could be. And then, just as quickly, I hear the echo of his voice years later, colder, practical. "Mom, I need the money." Those two voices live inside me, fighting. But only one will win. Paris, winter. The kind of cold that gnaws at your bones. I remember one night, when my son was barely 3, I carried him through the dark streets toward our rented room. My arms were numb, my breath a cloud in the freezing air. The stairwell smelled of damp wood and old cigarettes. Inside, the radiator was broken, the window cracked, and the walls sweated frost. I laid him on the narrow mattress, covered him with every blanket I owned. Still, he shivered. So I slipped off my own coat, threadbare, with patches on the elbows, and wrapped it around him, cocooning him in what little warmth I could offer. He looked up at me with feverish eyes, so small, so fragile. Then, with lips trembling, he whispered the words that would brand themselves onto my soul. "You're my hero, Mama." I nearly broke. No theater applause, no patron's compliment, no critic's review had ever pierced me the way the child's murmur did. In that moment, I felt both taller than the Eiffel Tower and smaller than the speck of ash in the fireplace. From then on, every sacrifice seemed bearable. Years later, when he was 6, I made him his first mask. Just scraps of newspaper and flour paste, painted white and gold. Nothing fancy yet. When I handed it to him, he cradled it as if I had given him treasure. That night, I found him asleep with it pressed against his cheek, the string tangled in his small fingers. The mask became his toy, his comfort, his secret. To me, it was a symbol. I was not just paying bills, I was building dreams. But dreams have a way of shifting, and so do children. Years passed. He grew taller, sharper in his words, quicker to laugh with friends than with me. I told myself it was normal, that distance was part of growing up. One evening, after a long day teaching at the workshop, I came home exhausted. The apartment was quiet except for a muffled voice drifting from his room. The door was slightly ajar. At first, I didn't mean to listen, but then I heard him low and tender speaking into his phone. "Don't worry, Mom will pay. She always does." I froze. The words were soft, almost affectionate, not cruel, not mocking, simply factual, as if I were a line item in a budget, as dependable as sunrise. My stomach tightened. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, hand over my mouth. Surely I had misheard. Surely it was about something trivial. A school trip, a late bill, nothing more. I whispered to myself, desperate. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I'm tired. I tiptoed away before he noticed me. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the kettle as it hissed. Steam curled up like smoke from a slow fire. And yet the words wouldn't leave my head. Mom will pay. She always does. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The white mask on the shelf seemed to glare at me, its blank eyes reflecting my unease. I turned my face away and forced myself to believe I was overthinking. It's just a thorn, I told myself. A tiny prick, nothing more. But deep down, I knew thorns, if ignored, grow into knives. It happened over dinner. The 4 of us. My son, his fiancée, myself, and Silence sat around the small table in my apartment. I had cooked chicken stew, the recipe his father once loved. I thought the familiar taste might bring us closer, soften the edges that had sharpened between us. Conversation was thin, punctured by the clink of spoons. Then, without warning, his fiancée looked up and spoke. Her tone was casual, almost playful, but the words struck like a hammer. "If your mother doesn't help, we won't have enough to pay the restaurant for the wedding." The room went silent. My spoon froze midway to my lips. I looked at her, then at him. Neither seemed embarrassed. They weren't even asking. It was an expectation, as natural as passing the salt. The stew cooled in my bowl. My chest constricted until I could hardly breathe. In that stillness, a faint sound broke the air, a clatter from the shelf. I turned my head just in time to see the white mask tumble down. It struck the floor and cracked, a jagged line splitting its blank cheek. I stared at the fracture, and in it, I saw myself. They did not notice. My son was already scrolling his phone, his fiancée sipping water. The mask lay broken on the tiles, and I, frozen, hollow, finally understood the truth. I wasn't invited to their wedding because I was never part of their story. I was just a resource, a walking purse, a silent sponsor. My voice, when it came, was faint, almost inaudible. So that's what I am to you. Neither of them looked up. I gathered the broken mask in my hands. Its plaster crumbled against my fingers, rough and cold. And as I pressed the pieces together, trembling, I knew I was no longer a mother in their eyes. I was only a wallet that breathed. Coda, that moment I understood. I was not their family. I was their bank. It began with something small, an email notification. The bank reminding me of another scheduled transfer. The number glared at me from the screen. 2,300 euros, rent for their new apartment. My finger hovered over the mouse, ready to approve, the way I had done countless times before. A habit, as automatic as breathing. But this time, my hand froze. I stared at the digits, my chest tight. It wasn't just the money, it was the silence that followed every transfer. No thank you, no call. Just emptiness, as if I were wiring funds to a stranger. I pushed the laptop away, the chair scraping the floor like a protest. I sat in the dim light of the kitchen, head in my hands, the clock ticking above me. The air smelled of stale coffee. My shoulders trembled. And for the first time in years, I let myself ask the questions I had avoided. What do I have left if I keep giving? What remains of me once the account is empty? Is freedom worth less than their approval? Am I still a mother or just a ghost tied to a bank card? Each question landed like a fist against my ribs. Harder, faster. I pressed my palms to my chest, trying to steady my breath. Then, quietly, almost mechanically, I opened the banking app again. My cursor hovered over the standing orders. Click. Cancel. Click. Delete. The sound was so soft, but to me it roared like thunder. I changed the passwords. Typed new strings of letters, numbers, symbols, hands trembling but firming with each keystroke. When the confirmation flashed, update successful. I exhaled, long and heavy, as if expelling years of servitude. My heart raced, my hands slick with sweat, but I felt taller somehow, even sitting down. I stood and walked to the corner of the room where the iron safe crouched, squat and gray. For years, it had been nothing more than a container for documents, jewels, the few relics of my life. Now it became something else. I bent down, spun the dial, felt the lock yield. The door creaked open. Inside, deeds, savings, a bundle of letters I could not bear to burn. I closed it again, slow and deliberate. The metal clanged shut with finality. Then I turned the key, pulled it free, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. The cold press of metal against my chest was electric. For the first time, the key was mine alone. I leaned against the safe, breathing hard. Tears slid down my cheeks, but they weren't the soft tears of defeat. They were sharper, like shards cutting through fog. I thought of the alternative. If I kept sending money, if I kept playing the silent sponsor, what would become of me? I pictured myself old and bent, fingers arthritic, still painting masks for students, while my son and his wife built a castle from my bones. I pictured my savings gone, my freedom gone, my very self dissolved until I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. That was the price of not changing, and it was too high. The decision was not gentle. It ripped through me, raw and jagged. But in that ripping, I found clarity. I whispered into the empty kitchen, my voice low but steady. I would rather lose a greedy son than lose myself. The words lingered in the air, foreign and frightening, yet truer than anything I had spoken in years. Something inside me shifted then. The trembling eased. My back straightened. My sentences, even in thought, shortened, hardened, like steel cooling into shape. No more long excuses. No more bending until I broke. I locked the safe, pressed the jacket to my chest, and let the silence wrap around me. Not as a cage, but as a shield. This was the moment I crossed the line from victim to voice, from giver to guardian. Silence became its own language. Days passed with no phone calls, no visits, only messages. Short, sharp, stripped of warmth. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a single line. "Where's the money, Mom?" No greeting, no name, just the demand, blunt as a stone. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I didn't reply, not out of strategy, but because I couldn't find words. Anything I might type would either beg or provoke, and I wanted neither. So I slid the phone aside, face down, and let the unanswered question rot in the dark. The apartment grew heavier, though nothing inside had changed. The clock still ticked, the kettle still hissed, the floors still creaked, yet every sound carried a new edge, as if each footstep across the wooden boards dragged a razor behind it. I would pour water into a glass and flinch at the clink, as though even my own movements betrayed me. The air itself thickened, pressing down on my shoulders, reminding me with every breath that a reckoning was coming. Sometimes I thought I heard him outside the door, the faint echo of shoes on the stairwell. I would pause, heart pounding, waiting for the knock that never came. Instead, silence settled again, crueler than shouting. The mask on my shelf seemed different too. Once only blank, now it looked accusatory. In the dim light, the crack across its cheek split wider, like a wound refusing to heal. I avoided its gaze, but each time I turned away, it felt as if the mask was following me, watching, waiting. Then came another message. "If you don't help us, we'll fall behind. Do you want that on your conscience?" A shiver raced down my spine. Not a request, an accusation. As though my refusal were a crime, my silence a betrayal. I typed 3 words in reply, "I can't anymore," then deleted them before pressing send. My thumb trembled above the button, but I couldn't release it. Instead, I erased the draft and locked the phone again. The kettle clicked off in the background, its sudden stop echoing like a slammed door. Nights were worse. I would lie awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional drip from the bathroom sink, each sound amplified in the stillness. Sleep, when it came, was fractured dreams of footsteps chasing me, voices whispering demands, the mask breaking into smaller and smaller shards I could never piece together. I woke with sweat on my skin, the taste of rust in my mouth, and the certainty that something was moving closer. The foreshadowing arrived in the simplest way. One morning, I opened the mailbox downstairs. Amid the usual flyers and bills lay a thick envelope with no return address. Inside was a neatly folded copy of a rental agreement, my son's new apartment contract. My name was handwritten at the bottom, forged, clumsy, but undeniable. I gripped the paper so hard it crumpled. Heat rushed to my face, but beneath it, an icy calm spread. The storm wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was at my doorstep. I folded the paper back into the envelope, tucked it under my arm, and climbed the stairs slowly. Each step thudded like a warning drumbeat. When I shut the apartment door behind me, I leaned against it, the envelope pressed to my chest. The air felt charged, as if lightning already threaded through the walls. I sat at the table staring at the cracked mask, the forged contract, the silent phone, and in that suffocating quiet, I understood this was not peace. It was the pause before collision, the hush that makes the thunder louder when it finally arrives. Coda hook, I knew then. The real storm was no longer approaching. It was here, circling, waiting for me to open the door. The knock came like a hammer. Not polite, not hesitant, insistent, pounding, rattling the old wood of my door. I froze mid-step. The apartment was silent except for that knock, over and over, faster, louder. I knew it was him before I even touched the handle. When I opened the door, the air shifted. My son stood there, taller than I remembered, his jaw clenched tight. Beside him, his wife, elegant, cold eyes flicking past me as if measuring the space. And just behind them, a man in a dark suit with a briefcase, a lawyer. The hallway felt narrower with them in it. their presence a shadow seeping into my home. They entered without waiting. The lawyer set his briefcase on the table with a deliberate thud. My son's wife smiled, sweet but sharp. "Mother," she said, her voice sugar-laced, "we only need a signature. Nothing complicated." My son stepped forward, pulling papers from the briefcase. His hand trembled slightly, though his tone was firm. "Mom, just sign the power of attorney. It'll make everything easier." I looked at the papers. Blank spaces filled with my name, my forged handwriting still fresh in memory. My stomach tightened. I lifted my eyes and forced a smile, brittle as glass. "Easier for who? For me to lose everything?" His jaw tightened. "It's not like that. It's so we can manage things for you. You're tired, Mom. You shouldn't worry about money anymore." I let out a low laugh, humorless. I've been tired for 30 years, yet somehow I still found the strength to fund your life. The lawyer cleared his throat, sliding the document closer. "Madam Moreau, this is standard procedure. A simple authorization." I pushed the paper back with one finger, slow and deliberate. "My life is not standard procedure." The silence cracked. My son slammed his hand on the table, the sound jolting the mask on the shelf. It wobbled but stayed upright. "Why are you making this so difficult?" he snapped. "You owe me. Everything I have you gave me, and now you want to take it back?" I stared at him, shocked by the venom in his voice. "I gave because I loved you, not because I owed you." His wife leaned in, her perfume sharp, suffocating. "If you truly love him, you'll sign. Families don't keep score." I met her gaze, my voice level. "Families don't forge signatures either." Her smile faltered. The lawyer shifted, trying to recover. "We don't need to make this hostile. Think of it as protection, someone to act on your behalf." I straightened my back, feeling the key in my jacket pressing against my heart. I don't need anyone to act for me. My hands still work. My mind still works. And I will decide what happens to what is mine. My son's face twisted red with anger. He slammed the papers down again, shoving them toward me. "Sign it. You owe me for all those years I had nothing. You owe me for existing." His words cut deeper than any blade. My breath caught, but I forced my body still. My hands trembled under the table, hidden in my lap, but my eyes never left his. Slowly, I stood. The chair scraped the floor, a low growl of defiance. My voice came out low, steady. "No, I don't owe you. Not a cent, not a breath, not a single drop of the life I have left." He shook his head violently. "You're being selfish." I stepped closer, close enough to see the veins throbbing at his temples. "For once," I said, my tone sharpening like glass under flame, "I am choosing myself. And if that makes me selfish, then so be it." The mask on the shelf trembled again, as if echoing me. The crack down its cheek caught the light, a reminder of what had already been broken. His shout came raw, tearing through the air. "You owe me your whole life." The words hung there, venomous, irreversible. My breath steadied. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from something brighter clarity. I raised my chin, my voice a blade. "No, I owe no one. I owe only myself one chance to live free." The words sliced the silence. Even the lawyer lowered his gaze. His wife pursed her lips, stepping back. My son froze, caught between rage and disbelief. For a long moment, no one moved. The air thickened, heavy with the stench of betrayal and truth finally spoken. Then I stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "This conversation is over. Leave my home." My son's eyes flashed, but he didn't move. It was his wife who tugged his sleeve, whispering something sharp in his ear. Reluctantly, he gathered the papers, crumpling them in his fist. The lawyer packed his briefcase, silent now. They left in a storm of footsteps and slamming wood. When the door shut, the apartment trembled with the echo. My body sagged against it, knees weak, breath shallow. My hands still shook, but my heart My heart beat steady, strong, louder than before. I looked at the cracked mask on the shelf, tilting sideways as if it had witnessed everything, and I whispered to it, my declaration still burning in the air. I don't owe them. I only owe myself. The shock arrived in a brown envelope stamped with a red diagonal line. You are Jeanette. It was slid under my door sometime after dawn. No knock, no bell. I found it when the kettle clicked off and the apartment was still gray with morning. Inside, a photocopy of a revised will. My name appeared in elegant, unfamiliar loops. According to the document, I had transferred full authority over my assets to my son in the event of deteriorating judgment. The date at the bottom read March 3rd, 2024, 16:20. At that time, I was in my workshop, teaching 6 students how to seal a plaster mold. My attendance sheet, still pinned to a corkboard by the door, recorded their signatures in blue ink between 16:88 and 18,003. A swallowing, airless anger rose to my throat. The signature on the will looked almost like mine. Almost. The R in Moreau curled too eagerly. I don't loop that way. The M was wrong. Mine leans left. This one stood upright, disciplined, as if a ruler had corrected it. I laid the paper flat on the table. The crack down the white mask's cheek seemed to widen. Not a misunderstanding, then. A fabrication. And not for a wedding dinner. For everything. I went first to the theater workshop behind the market hall, where my oldest friend Henri still painted sets 3 days a week. He took one look at my face and didn't ask me to sit. He pulled out a battered stool before I could fall. Show me, he said. His voice was the soft rasp of sandpaper. I handed him the copy. He held it to the light, whistling through his teeth. They tried to match your stroke. Clever, but they forgot your left lean. He tapped the M stiff as a soldier. I need a lawyer, I said. Someone who will believe me before they believe this. Henri nodded. Clara Duarte. Young, too stubborn to be bought. Her mother sang chorus in Faust for us years ago. He scribbled a number on a receipt from a paint shop. Call her now. Don't wait. Clara showed up at my door that same afternoon, a slim folder under her arm, hair pulled back like she was walking into a storm. She didn't waste words. May I see the document? I gave it to her with shaking hands. She scanned it, then turned it sideways, then upside down. Lawyers, it seems, read from every angle. Where were you March 3rd at 16:20, she asked. In my studio. 6 students. We started at 4. Names? I pulled the workshop register. My writing slanted and hurried. She copied the names, then lifted her eyes to the mass shelf. Is that yours? I nodded. She studied the crack, the powder of plaster along the lip, the dust halo on the wood. Don't clean this, she said suddenly. Not yet. Why? Because truth leaves residue. We'll need all of it. The next hit didn't wait. By evening, a rumor had spread through the building that I had become confused and transferred control to spare myself the burden. I found out when Madame Ortiz, my neighbor 2 floors down, grabbed my wrists in the stairwell. Isabel, she whispered, eyes wet. The boy, your son, came last week with a notary. He told me you wanted to avoid stress. I told them I had seen you climb those stairs with groceries and a stack of costumes. Confused? Ha! Her mouth flattened. He posted a letter right after. Thick. He had ink on his fingers. Ink, she nodded. Blue, the kind that stains. He used the lobby table to rest. I cleaned the smear after, but it was there. She squeezed my hands. I will testify. I saw him. It should have comforted me. Instead, fear flickered visible. Yes, but would anyone believe a widow in house slippers over a crisp document that bore my name? Clara moved quickly. She photographed the attendance sheet. She called my 6 students, who each sent voice notes confirming the time and the lesson. Plaster ceiling, gold leaf, the smell of glue. The way I stopped a boy named Miguel from rushing a second coat. She collected the receipt from the art supply store I'd visited at 15. 37, timestamp printed in thermal gray. She pulled the camera footage from the market hall's back entrance. At 15:54, there I was, heavy canvas bag on my shoulder, pushing the door with my knee. Layer the day, she said, flipping through evidence. Time is our ally, but time is also elastic when gossip pulls at it. By the weekend, a whisper had slid into the neighborhood cafe. She's making a fuss. After all her son has done for her, the barista offered me my coffee with a pitying tilt, the way one hands a blanket to someone drenched and shivering. I took the cup and sat anyway. I would not leave the places that knew my name. The counterattack came Monday, a letter from my son's lawyer printed on thick paper smelling faintly of varnish. In light of Ms. Moreau's recent cognitive decline, it began, and the rest turned into a smear before my eyes. Cognitive decline. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I pressed my tongue against my teeth hard enough to taste iron. Clara read over my shoulder, jaw tight. They're building a narrative, she said. If they can make you look unwell, the signatures become protective. She glanced at me. We answer with facts, not outrage. I have been outraged for years, I said quietly. I'm tired of being quiet about it. Good, she said, but we document first. Rage later. Allies began to gather one by one, like lanterns lit along a dark street. Henri arrived with a cloth-bound ledger from the theater, my invoice log for the past 5 years, dates, hours, payments, signatures from directors who are allergic to lies. He tapped a page stamped March 3. You billed for 3 prep hours and a class. If you were signing wills at 16, 20. You also learned to split yourself. Madame Ortiz returned with a small victory. I asked the post clerk, she said, triumphant. He remembers your son. Tall, with a black cap. The clerk noticed the envelope because the corner tore and had to be taped. She gave me a postal queue ticket printed with 16, 42, and a handwritten note from the clerk. Customer mailed, legal-sized envelope, requested priority. From the workshop, Anna, a quiet student who never speaks above a murmur, brought a photograph. We had taken it on March 3rd at 17:50, all of us grinning behind ridiculous half-painted masks. In the lower right corner, the timestamp glowed 17:50,021. I thought, maybe it helps, she said, cheeks pink. I hugged her without asking permission. She squeaked, then she hugged me back. Small lights, enough to see by. But for every light, a shadow. My son's wife posted a message the following evening. A pale paragraph, sweet as poison. We love Isabel so much. We're just trying to protect her future. A photograph accompanied it. Me at a dinner 3 years ago, eyes unfocused, mouth half open mid-laugh. They wrote a difficult season under it, as if grief and exhaustion were proof of madness. The comments erupted, half sympathy toward them, half suspicion toward me. I closed the app and sat with my hands flat on the table so I wouldn't shake. The mask watched. The crack seemed to grin. Clara asked me to practice answers. We sat under the studio's yellow lamp while she fired questions that sliced. Did you ever say you were tired of finances? Yes, but tired isn't incapable. Did you ever ask your son to manage a bill? Once, when I was in hospital with pneumonia, the bill was 42 euros. He paid it with my card. Have you misplaced keys? Left the stove on? Keys, yes, once, in the freezer by accident. The stove, no. Clara nodded, jotting. We admit the human. We refute the collapse. Her phone pinged. She glanced down, then up at me. Their side just filed a motion for temporary control of your accounts pending a hearing. My throat tightened. Can they do that? They can try, she said. They'll need to show urgency. What do we show? She smiled, not kindly, but with teeth. That urgency belongs to greed, not to truth. The night before our first court meeting, Henri hosted a modest supper at the theater canteen. Soup too salty, bread too hard, wine that tasted like metal. It felt like church. People I had taught years ago drifted in. Miguel, Anna, Sophia with paint under her nails. They each said little. It was not a night for speeches. Miguel pressed a small box into my palm. Inside lay a fresh white mask, uncracked, unpainted. For later, he said, not to hide, to start again. I wanted to tell him I didn't know how to start anything anymore. Instead, I touched the smooth plaster and let its coolness anchor me. For a brief hour, there was laughter, the low, tired kind that keeps people from falling apart. When we left, the market square smelled of rain. I tilted my face to it and let the drops rinse the salt from my cheeks. A breath, then back to war. The next morning, I found a second envelope under my door. Inside, screenshots. My son had messaged relatives abroad, collecting small statements about my forgetfulness. One cousin wrote, "She repeats stories. She must be declining." I closed my eyes. Perhaps I do repeat stories. Perhaps repetition is how the lonely keep their memories alive. But repetition is not surrender. I placed the screenshots on Clara's growing stack. She added a yellow tab labeled Hearsay, see Character. Let them stack gossip, she muttered. We'll stack timestamps. By Thursday, the building's handyman, Joao, knocked with his cap twisting in his hands. I keep camera in the lobby private for theft. He showed us grainy footage on his phone. My son at the table, head down, writing. A moment later, he slid a document into a large envelope, licked the flap, pressed it shut. The timestamp blinked 16:35. I felt something unclench. Proof doesn't heal, but it stabilizes the ground under your feet. Clara's eyes sparked. We're not just defending anymore, she said. We're drawing a map. Still, night brought its own merciless campaign. Alone, I replayed the boy who once slept with a paper mask in his hand. I asked myself ugly questions. When did I teach him that my love had no price? When did love become a language he used to bill me? Then, as if the dark demanded it, a final message arrived close to midnight. If you fight us in court, everyone will know you're unwell. Is that what you want? I typed a reply. I did not send it. I folded the phone shut like a mouth refusing to swallow a lie. The apartment hummed. Rain ticked against the window. Somewhere, a drain gargled. I sat still, palms open on the table like a woman praying without faith. Clara called at 07:12 the next morning. We have enough to block the motion, she said, voice brisk with purpose. But I need one more thing. A witness who saw him with documents before the post office, not just the clerk after. I thought of Madame Ortiz and her careful memory, of Joao and his camera, of Henry and his invoices, of students with timestamps and paint on their sleeves. I thought of the mask, cracked and watching. Then I remembered the lobby mirror, the one that faces the table where my son had leaned and written. I had wiped it the day after, irritated by a foggy smear in the corner shaped like a thumbprint. A mirror reflects more than faces. Sometimes it holds angles. I grabbed my keys. In the lobby, morning light slanted through the glass. The mirror wore a new clean, but above it, just above the frame, a tiny black dome I had never noticed. An auxiliary lens, one of Joao's cheaper add-ons. Joao? I called up the stairwell. Does this record? He jogged down, already nodding. Only 30-second bursts, motion activated. It covers the mirror, catches reflections to widen the view. Can it catch handwriting? Clara asked, appearing behind me like a conjured ally. Maybe not words, Joao said, but it catches hands, documents, faces. He fetched the archive card. We watched on his dusty laptop as the lens captured a ghost. My son's reflection, bent over the table, the glint of a fountain pen, the document's pale rectangle, his wife standing behind him with her phone light turned on to help him see better. Not words, but choreography. Enough. Clara exhaled slowly. That's the frame, she murmured. The moment before the lie becomes a letter. Back upstairs, I set the cracked mask beside the fresh one Miguel had given me. One split, one whole, past and possible. I stood between them and felt the strange balance of fear and resolve settle into my bones. I was not safe. I was not even close to safe, but I was not alone. The storm outside thickened, clouds sealing the sky, air trembling the way it does before it breaks. I looked at the door and, for once, didn't flinch at the idea of a knock. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, in the stillness of afternoon, when sunlight fell across my desk like a blade. I was searching for thread in the drawer beneath the masks. Nothing urgent, nothing remarkable. My fingers brushed against a thick envelope wedged at the back. I pulled it free, dust rising like ghosts. No return address. My name scrawled in ink I didn't recognize. I tore it open. Inside lay a power of attorney document. My name printed neatly at the top, my signature sprawling across the bottom. My heart lurched because I knew that hand, and it wasn't mine. The loop of the S, the straight-backed M. Wrong. Deliberate. The paper was cold beneath my fingers. I ran my thumb across the ink and felt it smear slightly, as if still fresh, as if the betrayal had only just dried. My pulse hammered in my ears. The clock ticked on the wall, each second a nail driven into my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I whispered aloud, though no one was there, "This is it." They would take even the breath from my lungs if the law allowed. My knees weakened, but my eyes sharpened. I folded the paper, placed it flat on the table. My hands trembled so violently, I pressed them into my lap to steady them. Inside my head, 3 questions thudded like drum beats. How long have they planned this? What would be left of me if they succeed? What do I choose now? Collapse or fight? I rose slowly. The document clutched to my chest. The crack in the white mask on the shelf seemed to widen. But this time I did not turn away. I let it stare at me. And I spoke to it, to myself, to the silence. Enough. I will not be erased. I will fight. The days that followed became a battlefield of paper. My dining table disappeared under piles of receipts, bank statements, attendance logs, photographs. The apartment smelled of ink and dust, like an old archive. Each document was no longer just memory. It became a weapon. Clara, my lawyer, paced the room with her sharp eyes scanning every page. "Think of it as sharpening blades," she said. "Every timestamp, every witness, every receipt is a sword edge. They cut with lies, we cut with proof." I nodded, sliding another folder across. My fingers left sweat stains on the cover. Friends arrived in shifts, carrying fragments of truth. Henri dropped off his theater ledgers. Anna brought the photo with the glowing timestamp. Madame Ortiz carried a handwritten note from the post clerk. Each offering felt like a stone placed at my feet, building a wall against the tide. I thanked them with trembling hands, each time whispering, "You don't know what this means to me." Henri only grunted, "We do. That's why we're here." Still, the nights pressed hardest. I stood before the mirror, practicing. At first, my voice cracked, weak, barely audible. I did not sign that paper. The reflection looked unconvinced. My eyes darted, my shoulders hunched. I tried again, louder, steadying my breath. I did not sign that paper. I was teaching. I was present elsewhere. I was alive, whole, working. Over and over, until the words became rhythm, until the woman in the mirror no longer looked frightened but unyielding. Sometimes I recorded myself on Clara's phone. The first time, I recoiled at the sound, wavering, breathless, like an old violin string ready to snap. By the 5th recording, the tone deepened, the edges hardened. I no longer sounded like prey. Clara listened once, then placed the phone down. Perfect, but remember, don't perform. Just tell them the truth with your whole chest. That is stronger than any script. She touched my arm, gentle. "Speak from the heart, Isabel. That is the strongest evidence we have." Between sessions, memories haunted me. How many times had I stayed silent, endured, swallowed the ache just to keep the peace? How many times had I mistaken sacrifice for love? I whispered to the woman in the mirror, not this time, not anymore. The night before the hearing, I laid out my clothes, a dark dress, simple, without ornament. My father's watch on the table beside it, still ticking, though the leather band had cracked. I polished my glasses, smoothed the documents into neat stacks. Each gesture felt ritualistic, sacred as though I were a soldier binding armor. I touched the cracked mask one last time. Then I turned to the unbroken one Miguel had given me. Smooth, waiting, full of possibility. For the first time in years, I did not see a tool for hiding. I saw a shield. Sleep was shallow, but dawn came all the same. I rose with steady hands, my bag heavy with paper, my heart heavy with both fear and resolve. At the door, I whispered into the empty room, I have carried everyone else for years. Tomorrow, I carry myself. The courtroom is colder than winter. Wood dark as old wine, walls that drink every sound. The judge's bench rises like a shore against a storm. When the clerk calls my name, my bones feel hollow and ringing, as if someone has struck me like a bell. On the left table, my son, his wife, their attorney in a suit the color of wet asphalt. On the right, me and Clara, with her narrow folder, her calm mouth, her eyes that say, steady. Behind us, the public benches creak with whispers. The curious, the kind, the undecided. The bailiff intones the rules. Phones sleep. Voices kneel. When the judge enters, the air contracts. Even grief holds its breath. The gavel taps once. The battle is public now. 3 details fix the scene in my mind. The clock above the door is 5 minutes fast. It will hurry us even when time drags. The window to the right throws a rectangle of light across the floor like a tightrope. I tell myself I will walk it. The white mask in my bag, Miguel's gift, rests between the files. Not to wear, not to hide. A reminder that blankness can be remade. The judge, a woman with iron gray hair and a voice honed on stone, looks from one table to the other. We are here regarding a petition for temporary control of Mrs. Barch, Isabel Moreau's assets pending determination of capacity and the validity of certain instruments. Counsel, proceed. My son's attorney stands. Smooth tone, steady cadence, practice concern. Your Honor, this is not adversarial. It is filial. My client seeks only to protect his mother in a period of decline. We submit a power of attorney duly executed, as well as testimony that Mrs. Estra Moreau has become forgetful, erratic with finances, and, regrettably, easily confused. Filial, the word slides like oil across the wood. Clara rises. Your Honor, we will show the document is a fabrication, the narrative is manufactured, and the only urgency here is greed disguised as guardianship. The judge nods once, then let's see it. Them, the lawyer calls a notary's representative, someone who claims a colleague recalls a signing near the relevant date. The recollection is gauzy. An older woman might have been Mrs. Moreau. Papers. He points to the date on the instrument. March 3rd, 2024, 16,020. A time chosen for convenience, he says gently, between her activities to avoid fatigue. Clara doesn't swallow the gentle. Do you have a ledger? A logbook entry? A fee receipt? An appointment record? The representative shuffles. We're searching. It may be misfiled. May. Clara lets the word dangle like a loose wire. No further questions. Them. They pivot to character. Screenshots bloom on a screen. Messages to relatives. She repeats stories. She's been so tired she once lost her keys. The lawyer's voice turns lullaby soft. We love Isabel, he says. We simply want to spare her stress. Us. Spare her stress, Clara echoes, then lifts a folder. Your Honor, time is a map. She lays out the coordinates. 1537. Art supply receipt, thermal stamped, 15,000 for market hall. Camera. Isabel, that is me, shoulder to door, canvas bag visible, 1680,083, workshop register, 6 students sign in blue ink, 1750,021, photo with students timestamp lit like a small moon. And before 1642, Clara adds, our building's post clerk logs a legal-sized envelope mailed by the petitioner, Mrs. Combe, Moreau's son. With tape reinforcing a torn corner, the post-Q ticket is here. The judge leans forward. My son stares at a spot on the table as if he could fall into it. Clara calls Dr. Lorene Pellet my pharmacist of 20 years. Sensible shoes, sharp glasses, voice like clean linen. Ms. Moreau fills her prescriptions on schedule, she says. She asks precise questions. Recently, she corrected a dosage misprint before I did. A faint smile, professional pride. If she were declining in the way alleged, I would expect missed refills, confusion, perhaps double dosing concerns. I have none. The other side tries to pry. People can mask decline, the attorney suggests. Sometimes, Dr. Pellet concedes, but pharmacies see what families miss. Patterns, slips, Ms. Fine. Moreau's pattern is consistency. A simple line, steady as a heartbeat. Next, Joao, our building handyman. Cap in hand, he looks like a man who apologizes to doors before fixing their hinges. Clara walks him gently. On March 3rd, I saw her son in the lobby around 16. 35, he says. He leaned on the table, wrote something. The small camera above the mirror caught the reflection. He slid papers into a large envelope. His wife held a phone light so he could see better. Then he left. Clara plays the 30-second clip. It is grainy, ghost-like. A man bent over. A rectangle of paper. A cone of light. Motion like urgency. Do you also maintain the mailbox log? I do. And the mirror cleaning? Yes. The day after, I removed a thumb smear. Thank you. The opposing counsel rises, irritated. Mr. Joao, you are not a forensic expert. No, he agrees, unoffended. I fix what breaks, and I count what passes. Sometimes the plainest truth is the sharpest blade. Henry takes the stand next, paint-stained cuffs, posture like a tree that doesn't bow. He opens the theater ledger. Invoices, he says. 5 years. Her handwriting leans left, always has. The signature on this so-called instrument stands straight as a soldier. It's a mimic, not a match. The attorney scoffs. You're also not a handwriting expert. Henri smiles, barbed. No, I'm an artist. I live by lines. Real ones have breath. False ones hold their breath too long. A ripple moves through the benches. The kind of sound people make when someone hits a nail head without a hammer. Finally, Anna, my quiet student, clutching the workshop photo. She speaks softly, but the room leans in. She taught us gold leaf that day, Anna says. She held my hand here. She points to the photo edge to stop me rushing. That was 17,000. She was with us, not signing anything. She glances at me, then at the judge. She belongs to herself. Everyone should. The judge's mouth doesn't soften, but her eyes do. Between witnesses, I look once, only once, at my son. His profile is carved from stubborn stone. His eyes avoid me, trained on the imagined mistake in the wood grain. When he finally speaks, answering his lawyer's prompting, his voice is steady, practiced. She asked me to help, he says. She said bills exhausted her. She wanted peace. My throat tightens. I remember pneumonia, the 42-euro pharmacy payment I asked him to make with my card. Need is not surrender. But here he stands, turning a moment of weakness into a habitat for power. If the room had no air before, it has less now. The judge asks, why choose March 3rd at 16? 20? He hesitates. It was convenient. Convenient, the judge repeats, as if tasting a too sweet pastry. She writes something. The pen scratches louder than the HVAC. Their attack, a cousin's affidavit. She repeats stories. Our counter, Clara lifts my journal pages. March 3rd, 4, 5 neat entries. Ingredients for stew. A costume sketch with measured numerals. The precise note. Miguel rushes second coat. Remind to breathe between layers. She doesn't argue. She lets the ink argue. Their attack. A welfare. Email sent to a social worker never followed through. Concern for Ms. M's safety around finances. Our counter, bank statement showing transfers outbound only to my son and routine payments otherwise. Regular balances, no late fees, no overdrafts. Order is its own alibi. Their attack, the notary memory. Again, our counter, Clara asks, where is your colleague today? The answer, ill, unavailable. Clara nods, almost kind. Illness happens, she says. Documents either do or don't. Clara calls Madame Ortiz. House slippers, a coat too big, eyes bright as church lamps. I saw him, she says, pointing at my son. He came with papers. Told me Isabel wanted calm. I told him she carries groceries and costumes up those stairs. Calm is not the issue. She holds up the postal ticket, 1642. He mailed it then. Tape on the corner. I read the number as he took it. I like numbers, she adds, defiant and sweet. Thank you, madame, the judge says, unexpected warmth slipping under the formality. When she steps down, my son's lawyer stands, slick again. Your Honor, we should not villainize a devoted child for seeking to protect his mother. If Ms. Moreau resists help, is that not further proof of impairment? Clara doesn't rise at once. She lets the insinuation settle, dark and sticky, then cuts cleanly through it. Or proof, she says, of consent, of choice, of a woman tired of being treated like a wallet that breathes. A murmur. The judge taps the gavel once, lightly. Even the wood wants quiet, but the point is made. Clara touches my arm. Ready? I nod. When I stand, my knees remember winter, but my spine remembers stone. The window's light lands across the floor. I step into it. I take the oath. The words taste like iron and rain. Clara's questions are scaffolding, not cage. Ms. Moreau, what is your work? I design masks for theater. I teach. I count edges and curves. I hold timelines in my head, drying times, layering intervals, minutes between coats so plaster breathes. My life depends on memory and patience. On March 3rd at 16:20, I was teaching 6 students to seal plaster. We wrote our names. We laughed. I told Miguel to slow down. At 17:50, we took a photo. My pharmacy had refilled a prescription earlier that week. The pharmacist knows my schedule better than my blood. At 15:54, I am on camera entering the market hall. At 16:35, my building camera sees my son writing on the lobby table. At 16:42, the post clerk logs an envelope, large, legal, mailed by him. I lift my eyes to the judge. I did not sign that paper. The other counsel steps in, scissors ready. Ms. Moreau, have you at times felt overwhelmed by finances? Yes, I meet his gaze, but tired is not incompetent. Saying I need help once is not consent to be erased. He tries another route. Do you repeat stories? Today, yes, in court, because repetition is how truth survives lies. A whispered laugh ripples and dies. The judge's pen pauses, then continues. Clara nods for the last question. If you could tell the court who you are in your own words, what would you say? I breathe deep enough to feel the cold settle, then lift. When I speak, my voice is not loud, but it rings. The words were born nights ago in my kitchen and sharpened on the edge of everything I've lost. I am not a shadow for someone else to sign in my place. I am the keeper of my memories and my sweat. My hands built a life from plaster and patience. Yes, I am older. I am sometimes tired, I forget where I put my keys and remember exactly who I am. I raised a son with the belief that love gives. I will not let that belief be forged into a chain. I claim the simplest dignity a person can claim, the right to hold my own name. Silence holds me like a lake holds a lantern. Across the aisle, my son stares at the floor. His throat moves. His wife studies the ceiling as though it could offer an appeal. The judge's eyes, unreadable, shift to the counsel table. Anything further? My son's lawyer rises, decides against speaking, and sits back down. Sometimes the smartest word is none, sometimes the loudest none is cowardice. The judge removes her glasses. The room tilts toward her. This court has reviewed the petition, the instrument presented as a power of attorney, and the testimony and exhibits. A beat. The petitioner's narrative of decline is unsupported by credible professional evidence. The notary foundation is absent. By contrast, Ms. Moreau's timeline is precise, corroborated by multiple contemporaneous records and witnesses. Another beat. The clock above the door insists on a faster world. The judge refuses. The motion for temporary control is denied. The document purporting to assign power of attorney is rejected as unreliable and is void for the purposes of these proceedings. Ms. Moreau retains full control of her assets. The gavel strikes. Once, twice. Wood answers wood. The room breathes for the first time in hours. The sound swells, chairs scrape, a muffled sob somewhere behind me, the scrape of a pen from my own table as Clara writes the word denied in the margin, as if to make sure reality holds. I don't cry at first. I simply exhale, a long rope of air unspooling from a depth I didn't know I still held. Then the tears come warm, not scalding, not humiliation, not defeat. Wash, salt, and light. I turn my head. My son is already standing, lips thin to a white line. For a heartbeat, the child flickers behind the man-paper mask, clutched in sleep, fever heat under a threadbare coat. He looks at me and away. He allows the lie to shepherd him out. His wife gathers their bag. The lawyer speaks in a low rush. I cannot hear the words over the hum in my ears. Perhaps it is just my pulse relearning how to beat for me. Clara squeezes my shoulder. It's done, she says simply. It started, I answer. She understands. Court ends the lie. Life begins the truth. Outside, the sky has the soft brightness of a day that forgot how to rain. The courthouse steps feel steeper on the way down. I take them slower, as if sliding out of deep water. Henri waits by the last pillar with 2 paper cups of coffee that will never taste good, but always taste like survival. We don't speak for a minute. Pigeons stitch the square with their dull feet. Someone laughs, a clean sound that doesn't nick skin. I open my bag and touch the 2 masks, the cracked one, the unbroken one, past and possible. I thought victory would lift me like a kite. Instead, it places me on the ground with both feet. Solid. Mine. I thought I would be empty, I say. I am not. Henri shrugs like a tree. You were never empty. You were carrying too much that was not yours. Clara joins us, papers tucked under her arm. There will be no appeal, she says. Not with that record. But even if there is, we will be ready. I nod. Across the square, light slants through a narrow street and lands on the window of a small cafe. The glass throws a bright rectangle onto the cobbles, pale as a stage mark. I think of the tightrope of light in the courtroom and smile, small and real. For the first time in months, I imagine tomorrow without bargaining with myself. I imagine a morning where the first voice I hear is my own. I imagine students, gold leaf, the smell of glue, laughter that belongs to work and not to pleading. We start walking. My steps are measured, not tentative. My chest aches, but the ache has air in it. At the curb, Clara pauses. Say it once more, she says softly. For yourself. I close my eyes and let the sentence find the shape of my lungs. I am not a shadow for someone else to sign in my place. I am the keeper of my memories and my sweat. When I open my eyes, the square looks the same and completely new. The storm didn't vanish, it passed. It may return in smaller weather, sticky and sly. But I have a key in my coat, a spine that remembers stone, and a name that belongs to me. The rest of the story, the leaving, the lightness, the teaching, waits beyond the door. For now, I stand in the clean air, and it does not ask me to pay. The apartment is silent when I return. No gavel, no shuffling papers, no murmurs of strangers weighing my life. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock. The stillness is so complete, it startles me. I sit down on the edge of the bed, still in the same dark dress, and stare at the ceiling. I won. That is the sentence everyone will remember. But lying here, the words echo strangely inside me, hollow, uneven, as though spoken in an empty cathedral. I won, I whisper aloud. My own voice startles me. It sounds foreign, like the voice of someone older, someone I don't yet know. Relief should flood me. Instead, a strange vacancy spreads through my chest. The trial had filled every hour with adrenaline, with the terror of losing everything. Now that it is over, the silence presses against me from every side. I see my son's face again, turned away from me, eyes fixed on the courtroom floor. His voice echoes, "You owe me your whole life." The words don't fade with victory. They stay lodged like shards under the skin. I won, yes, but I lost him. The ceiling above me is bare, pale, without features. It looks like the surface of water just before you sink. Am I free now? I ask the dark. Or just alone? The clock ticks, offering no answer. My body aches with exhaustion. The trial pulled the marrow out of me, but it also left a jittering energy like after a storm when the air still crackles. I roll onto my side, the sheets cold. The cracked mask rests on the nightstand, its fracture black in the dim light. I reach out, trace the broken line. For months, it symbolized betrayal. Tonight, for the first time, it feels like something else. Survival. A mask can break and still remain a mask. I am broken too, yet here I am. The emptiness grows too heavy to bear lying down. I swing my legs over the bed and shuffle to the kitchen. The floorboards creak as though surprised to carry me again. I set water to boil. The kettle's hiss fills the silence, a small companion. I drop a tea bag into a chipped mug mint, the one flavor I never shared with my son. As the steam rises, I breathe it in deeply, letting the sharpness sting my nose, clearing my chest. It is an ordinary act, almost laughably small, but it steadies me. Cup in hand, I walk to the window. The night outside is deep but not unfriendly. A few streetlights glow amber, and somewhere in the distance a cat yowls, breaking the hush. I unlatch the window and push it open. Cold air floods in, brushing my cheeks, lifting strands of hair. It smells of rain-soaked stone and faint wood smoke. I inhale until my lungs ache, then exhale slowly, watching the breath mist and vanish. For months, every breath felt stolen, taxed, conditional. Tonight, for the first time, it belongs only to me. I lean on the sill and let my mind drift. I think of the courtroom, the witnesses, the evidence, the moment the judge said, "Denied." That word was heavy as a bell toll, yet also light enough to open a door. I imagine stepping through it now, barefoot, carrying nothing except myself. But freedom is not a switch you flip. It is a path you learn to walk, one uncertain step at a time. And right now, step one is sipping hot mint tea by an open window, feeling the night air without fear. The clock strikes midnight. The sound is deeper than usual, resonant, as though the walls want me to hear. I close my eyes. I remember every sacrifice. Nights in cold rooms, coins counted, meals skipped. They flash in sequence, a film reel of giving. Then the trial scenes replay questions, answers, the declaration I spoke with, steady voice. I am the keeper of my memories and my sweat. Those words belong to me now, carved into my ribs. I touch the window frame, wood rough under my fingers, and anchor myself. A thought comes, soft but startling. I am no longer waiting for a knock at the door. For months, each sound in the stairwell froze me. Now, as I sip tea, I hear someone walk past outside, and my body does not clench. They are simply footsteps, nothing more. The storm has passed. Of course, questions remain. Will my son return? Will he ever look at me with something other than hunger or blame? The ache of not knowing stretches wide. But tonight, I choose not to chase answers. Tonight, I choose to let the ache be and still breathe. I close the window at last, the night air lingering in the room. The tea has cooled, but I finish it anyway, each swallow grounding me further into the present. When I return to bed, the cracked mask still waits. I place the smooth, unbroken mask beside it, the one Miguel gave me, old and new, past and possible, brokenness and beginning. I lie back, watching both until my eyelids grow heavy. I won the trial. I have not yet won peace, but peace, I realize, is not handed down like a verdict. It is built moment by moment. And maybe, just maybe, tonight is the first brick. Morning in Lisbon smells of salt and roasted coffee beans. I sit at a small iron table by the Tagus River, my hands wrapped around a porcelain cup. The espresso inside is dark, bitter, alive. I lift it, and it feels light, as if gravity itself has less hold on me. The breeze carries gull cries and the faint hum of trams passing behind me. This is my ordinary now. The sound of students' laughter in my workshop down the street, the sight of sunlight glittering on water, the weightlessness of a cup of coffee that belongs to me alone. I sold the apartment in Paris 2 months after the trial. The rooms were stripped bare, each echo carrying ghosts of arguments, silences, slammed doors. I left little behind, just old curtains, a chair too heavy to move, and the cracked mask. For a while, I debated whether to bring it. Part of me wanted to abandon it, to let the fracture rot in that room. But in the end, I wrapped it carefully in cloth and placed it in my suitcase. Not as a wound, but as proof that even broken things can travel, can witness new beginnings. In Lisbon, I found a studio space near Alfama. Whitewashed walls, tall windows, the scent of the sea rolling in. I opened a small class for students of theater and fine arts, those curious enough to learn the patience of mask making. On the first day, I placed the cracked mask on a shelf by the door. My students noticed it at once. "Why is it broken?" one asked. "Because life breaks things," I answered simply. "And because brokenness can still teach." No one touched it, but all of them looked. I saw in their eyes the curiosity, the unspoken recognition that the mask was more than plaster. It was story. I walked barefoot across the cool tiles each morning, windows flung wide to let in the Atlantic breeze. My life once shrank to the size of court papers and accusations. Now it stretches outward. The colors of paint on young hands, the chatter of students trying to sculpt laughter into plaster, the rhythm of sandpaper smoothing rough edges. At night, when the city quiets, I sit on my balcony with a journal. The pages fill not with ledgers or lists of debts, but with sketches. A gull mid-flight, a woman balancing a basket on her head, the profile of a boy practicing his lines for a play. Life recorded not as obligation, but as delight. The contrasts are sharp, deliberate. Once I carried a phone that felt like a stone, heavy with demands. Now, I lift a cup of espresso that weighs almost nothing. Once, my evenings ended staring at a cracked ceiling, asking whether I was free. Now, they end with the sea breeze touching my hair, telling me freedom is already here. Once, the white mask symbolized exhaustion and hiding. Now, It sits in my studio as a relic, no longer to conceal me, but to remind me I survived. The circle has closed, but I have stepped out of it. Do I think of my son? Of course. Blood is stubborn, memory is stubborn. Sometimes when the gulls cry, I hear his childhood voice, soft and feverish. You're my hero, Mama. The echo is tender, then sharp, but I do not chase it. I let the sound pass, as gulls always do, leaving the air quiet again. I do not wish him ruin. I do not wish him apology. I wish him simply gone from the center of my life, because I have reclaimed that center for myself. Freedom is not loud. It is not a trumpet or a gavel. It is quiet, ordinary, almost invisible. It is the sound of scissors cutting fresh cloth for straps. It is the sight of students holding up their first mask, shy but proud. It is the breath of wind slipping through the studio windows, lifting the smell of plaster dust. It is the lightness of drinking coffee without dread. One afternoon, a student named Ines lingered after class. She traced the cracked mask with careful fingers. "Why don't you fix it?" she asked. I smiled. "Because some things are more honest when left broken." She nodded, thoughtful, then held up her own half-painted mask. "Then maybe this one will keep a flaw too, just to remember." I laughed, a sound that felt fresh in my mouth, like water after salt. The white mask is no longer my prison. It is my teacher. And the new mask Miguel gave me, the smooth, unbroken one, still rests in my home. I haven't painted it yet. I don't know if I ever will. Perhaps it is better as it is. A symbol of potential, of clean beginnings. Two masks, one fractured, one whole. I live between them, no longer defined by either. Sometimes I imagine the Isabel of 2 years ago, hunched in her Paris apartment, phone buzzing with demands, heart locked in chains of guilt. If she could see me now, barefoot by the river, surrounded by students, laughing over spilled paint, she would not believe it. She would think it was someone else's story. But it is mine, entirely mine. As the sun lowers over Lisbon, I lift my cup again. The espresso is nearly gone, a thin ring of dark at the bottom. I tilt it, savoring the last bittersweet sip. I look across the river, light shimmering like broken glass mended by gold. I breathe deeply, and the air does not hurt. I whisper to no one and to everyone. I have left the masts behind, and for the first time, I live with my true face. If you have read this far, it means you walk beside me through silence and betrayal, through courtrooms and cracked plaster, through fear, and finally into the light of Lisbon. For that, I thank you. Truly, it is not easy to sit with someone else's pain. It is not easy to hold the weight of a stranger's story. Yet you stayed, you listened, you bore witness. And in doing so, you reminded me that even when family abandons us, even when those we love most choose greed over love, we are not alone. There are always eyes willing to see, ears willing to hear, hearts willing to understand. I carried masks all my life. Some I made with my hands, delicate plaster, layers of paint, thin straps. Others I wore on my face without realizing it. The mask of the obedient mother, the patient provider, the woman who never said no. Those masks were heavy. They pressed against my skin until I could no longer tell where they ended and I began. But now, sitting here telling you this story, I have taken them off. And I want to ask you only once, only this. If one day you discover that you are only a supporting role in someone else's script, will you keep wearing their mask, or will you tear it away and live with your own face? I cannot answer for you. No one can. The choice belongs to you alone, as it once belonged to me. Perhaps your answer will come quickly, like a sudden breath. Perhaps it will take years of silence, years of carrying too much, before you are ready to decide. Either way, when the moment arrives, I hope you remember me here by the river with my cup of coffee, reminding you that freedom is possible, that life after masks is possible. If this story touched you, if it stirred something inside you, I invite you to share it. Leave a comment. Tell me what you saw in my journey that reflects your own. Tell me if you have ever worn a mask too heavy, or if you are still wearing one now. And if you wish to walk with me further, to hear more stories, with real bruises and real light, then follow along. Each week, I will lift another mask, reveal another face, because stories are not just for those who live them. They are for those who need to remember that they too have a choice. So thank you again for being here, for staying, for reading every word, for seeing me. I will leave you with this. I left the mask behind me, and for the first time, I live with my true face. Now it is your turn.